I am DJ Jones of all, and you know Chris Ryder. We all dinner at the Roundtable Podcast, your source to knowledge. Tonight's a special segment, a special topic, although we covered it in our previous episode, nature versus nurture. And I want to elaborate more on that, on that topic, because, it's still, like a ongoing debate about, this whole thing about nature versus nurture. Are we made by nature, or are we made by our nurture, or is it a combination of both? So I want to give you guys my assessment of what I think about nature versus nurture. And, with the information that I provide, by all means, I want you guys to, do your own research and come up with your own conclusion about this, this whole idea about nature versus nurture. So let me begin though. So nature, right? So when we talk about nature, we're talking about really, obviously our biology. So all living things are made up of cells. Cells are microorganisms. And I believe the human body has about 50 trillion cells, over 50 trillion cells. So there was something that I found very interesting as I was researching about this topic again. In a book of The Biology of Belief by Dr. Bruce Lipton, in chapter 4, which is a chapter that, it kind of makes me laugh a little bit, but it's very true. Chapter 4, which is basically entitled, "Is the Environment Stupid?" And in the chapter, he talks about how, cell biologists did a study of having cells that were put in place in healthy environments. And when they did that, the cells thrived. When they altered the environment of the cells and made it more restrictive, it started to weaken. So that was an indication how our biology really relies on our environment. Many of you may be familiar with the book The Origin of Species by Charles Darwin. And he's known for, as far as this whole thing about the natural selection and the survival of the fittest. And the book was very racist too at the same time, which I definitely talk about that in a different episode. But at the end of his life, Darwin actually admitted though that he wasn't 100% right about his theory. That he actually wrote a letter, which I'm going to read now. In his letter, at the end of his life, he stated, "In my opinion, the greatest error which I have committed has not been allowing sufficient weight to the direct action of the environment, e.i. food, climate, etc., independently of natural selection. When I wrote The Origin, and for some years afterwards, I can find little evidence of the direct action of the environment. Now there is a large body of evidence." That was a key thing. Now there's a large body of evidence, meaning. And that's something that really speaks volumes, because again, many people, still follow this theory about, this whole thing about genetics and it's all the genes and, all of us are controlled by genes and, it's just like, it's out of our control, obviously. And I think that notion right there is so dangerous that we just really blame it on genetics. And this is how we justify certain, behaviors, and we just call it, human nature. So actually, I'm here to debunk that. And again, I definitely want you guys to do your own, research on this and come up with your own conclusion about this. So, I think the harsh reality is that many of us have been programmed into accepting this whole, complete false dichotomy of, we just, it's just, genetics. And, this is not, to disregard that, there are abnormal genes, but in this, again, there's always that, there could always be that one human factor in our biology. So I'm not negating that, but those cases are so rare. Very rare, and that's something that, you have to really, consider. You got to think about that, and also there's been, studies that you could have a gene disorder, but that gene disorder can only turn on based on the interactions of other genes and the environment. So it's really, again, it goes back to the environment, and this is something that, it's just to me, it just makes sense of how our body works, because you think about how we all need the proper nutrients, to create energy in our body, because our cells create energy. But if you don't get the proper nutrients in our body is going to react a different way, and even, again though, being like where us, we need to have our needs met. So it's just, to me, logical to think of this way. Human nature can only be human nature when it correlates to human needs. This whole thing about greed and, someone is just like this by nature of greed. No. I mean, one thing is evident as far as like us as humans is that we're very self-preserved because we need to make sure that our needs are met. But if our needs are met, there's no point of being greedy. So when you live in an environment of abundance, that you have more than you need, then I don't see the logics of someone being greedy. When there's an abundance of resources, but you choose to be greedy about it, that's something that's a learned behavior. And this is what I'm gonna go at right now. When you're talking about human nature, we're really talking about learned behavior. When it comes to those terms, as far as having an abundance where you go, surpass your needs, but you still want to hoard, resources for the simple fact you want to have power over other people. That is a learned behavior. That is not something that's by nature. So, again, I mean, I want to make sure that I really, try to get this point across, because, going back into genetics, when you talk about diseases, yes, again though, this is always that one human factor. This is not something that we cannot disregard. However, though, it's a very small handful of cases about this that could actually be truly, determined by genetics. But the fact is that most diseases are not genetically determined. You may have a genetic component that's in a predisposition, but that doesn't mean that it's predetermined. So, the fact is, again, our biology correlates with our environment. And when I talk about environment, I'm not just talking about the external environment. I'm talking about the environment as soon as you become a fetus inside your mother. Because you are now living inside your mother, because now you are actually an organism now when you become a fetus. And those effects have an effect on you. If your mother, just say, for example, the mother, is going through a lot of economic stress, it's going through depression or it's a victim of violence, all that has an impact on the unborn baby. This could all have an impact. And these are genetic factors that could definitely play a role when you are now, growing up, when you're developing as a human now. So these are things that we gotta really, take into consideration and think about this. So, going back what I was saying, we are still programming to really, when I say we, I'm not just saying all, but I'm saying in general, many of us are still programming to believing about this whole human nature idea, which to me doesn't make, it's just like, I don't understand how we don't really look at the environment and really understand that everything is really based on our surrounding environment. All of us are products of our environment. Everything that we do is influenced one way or another by our environment. Our language, the way we speak. A Chinese baby is not born speaking Chinese. It's based through their upbringing. The same thing with our behavior, our culture. The way we dress, the way we walk. All that's been picked up by our environment. And this is something that we definitely have to really, dissect this more and really understand this on a more deeper level. And I think it's just that first of all, the development of the human biology is based on the quality of social relations that we have within our environment. You cannot separate our neurological functions of a human being from the environment. Because again though, it has to correlate with each other. And when you think about the human brain, right? We have the limbic part, right? So the limbic part is basically where it's the fight, flight, freeze response, which triggers the, that survival mode. Am I safe? you know. But due to the neofrontal cortex that the humans have, we have the ability to think and organize differently than other species. You know, this is how we're able to really reprogram ourselves, you know, through our, through our conscious that connects with our subconscious mind. You know, because again, the subconscious mind is the habit mind. You know, it's the mind that really controls. It's really the subconscious mind. So again, though, you know, once we get a better understanding about, you know, how the environment plays such a significant role, then we get to see why things are the way they are today in this world. You know, I mean, humans, we are biopsychosocial organisms. And what I mean by that again is that we are a product of the interplay of our biology, our active psychology, and our social and environmental factors that surround us. So again, we're all affected by our surrounding environment, you know. And when you think about, again, going back into this whole thing about genes, you know, yes, you know, we can identify a abnormal gene that has some relation to a predisposition, you know, to commit, for instance, violence, but only if that individual has been exposed to or subject to severe violence, that gene would turn on. A great book I definitely recommend is the book of Violence, Reflection on a National Epidemic by James Gilligan, MD. Great book. He was a former director at Harvard. He actually worked in the prison system, and he was studying these behaviors about these prisoners, of what made them trigger. And you know, through his research, you know, came to find out that a lot of these prisoners went through severe child abuse growing up. You know, these are the most violent people in the world. We're talking about murderers, you know, rapists, people that just, you know, these horrific acts. And the question I always said to myself is that, you know, what triggered that? You know, like to even think that someone just, you know, naturally born like that, and it's you know, that's just the way they are. You know, it's just like just being so intellectually dishonest with yourself, or just not informed as much. You know, this is why I want to debunk this whole human nature thing of that, you know, this, you know, that's how some people are. So, you know, again though, you know, we are shaped by our environment. You know, our values, you know, hence our behavior are all shaped by our environment. You know what I'm saying? The cause and effects. So, I mean, again, I can't really stress the fact that we are all products of our environment, you know, and again, you know, when we speak of human nature, we're really talking about learned behavior. You know, we are reacting creatures, and it's very important to understand that, you know. And there was a study that I definitely want to share out. It was in a book also, the new Human Rights Movement by Peter Joseph. And there was a study about chimps and bonobos, which are the closest living genetic relatives to humans, are chimps and bonobos. I believe we share about 99% of our genome, chimps and bonobos. And going back into the research, about 1 million years ago, they were actually divided, the chimps and bonobos, by the Congo River in Africa. So they were forced to actually adapt to two different environments. Okay, so through the studies, you know, the question was, you know, why do they behave so different? They come from the same origin, you know, and they shared 99% of their genome. However, though, they behave very differently. And through the study, it's shown that, you know, chimps have an extreme, brutal social hierarchy that are dominated by men. Or males, sorry, I said men. Males. And I'm thinking about human culture, which really, you know what? It really correlates to the culture of humans, which is like, it's the way we live. I mean, it's just, I think it's safe to say that this world is still dominated by men, you know? So it's very similar to the chimps society. So through those studies, you know, they're very highly competitive. They're very territorial. And looking at that, it was the opposite of bonobos. Bonobos, through the research, they behave very differently. They live in a more egalitarian society that is actually governed by females. Actually, the female takes on the alpha roles in a bonobo society. through the study that they researched. And again, though, it brings the question: if chimps and bonobos share 99% of our genome, why do they behave so differently? And the answer to that is that the environment. The environment changed everything. Chimps, they live in an environment that's very scarce. They live in a very fluctuated climate where the resources that they need is not as available compared to the bonobos, who actually live in a rainforest. They have an abundance of food. And this is why they behave differently. This is why chimps have to make sure they manage their resources, and they have to have a certain hierarchy to make sure those resources are maintained. So these are the things that we have to really consider and really think about this. How the environment plays such a significant role in our behavior, the way we look at things, So again, please research this. Please do your own homework. Don't just go by what I just say. I definitely want to make sure that, I'm just trying to really provide the information, and it's up to you guys to obtain it and just come up with your own conclusion. And one also thing I want to talk about, intelligence. First, I want to say the IQ exam, I think it's insufficient. Meaning that to me, it doesn't it's not only just culturally biased, it's socioeconomically biased. And what I mean by that is basically, it could be, the same, ethnic background. However, though, it could be two different socioeconomic status. If you want to compare a suburban kid that comes from a middle-class family that lives, with two parents, both parents are highly educated, they got, professional jobs, and that child is exposed to, a different language, gets better resources, has more, extra, help, compared to an inner city kid who might not have two parents, and the parent may not have, may have a lack of education, and just trying to make ends meet, barely trying to make ends meet, and it's basically exposed to a different type of language because that parent wasn't really educated to really speak the language that we consider to be standard English or proper English. How we could really say that the suburban kid is more intelligent than the inner city kid? It's all because the environment they were brought up in. It doesn't make him better than the other person. This is why I'm saying, I don't take this IQ thing serious, and I think it's just it's just irrelevant. It's irrelevant, and it's a very unfortunate because we tie intelligence as if something that's really innate. And yes, it's one little slight factor you can make an argument about, but intelligence is really based on the environment, what you've been exposed to. Again, when I say about language, the way we speak to each other, you cannot speak a language that has not been exposed to you. It is impossible. An Eskimo cannot have a dream about going to the beach, seeing, ladies walking around with bikinis if they've never been exposed to that kind of environment. So everything is tied into our associative memory. And this is why, again, going back to intelligence, there was a study made by Columbia University. And I'm gonna definitely put it on the description section so you guys could definitely look and see for yourself. But there was a study that has shown that low socioeconomic status has a direct influence into people's cognitive capacities. It is no surprise that children in low-income families lag behind the higher income counterparts on virtually all measures of achievement. Okay? And this gap tends to increase over time based on the study. Okay? So this study related to the parents' income, education, occupation, and social status is strongly associated with their cognitive and brain development, particularly in the areas of language, memory, self-regulation, and spatial skills. As they get older, there's a high risk that the child that was born in those deprived socioeconomic status is going to suffer from physical and mental health as they grow. Okay, this is a study that's been proven. Okay, and this is something to me this is logical. When you think about this. So when we look at it from a large scale and start to break it down into a smaller scale, you get a better understanding of the root causes of why things are the way they are. But however, most people, we don't look at it from that perspective. To be fair, humans, we do have a difficult time looking at things in a systemic way. We solely look at the individual. We don't look at the society. And as a psychology major, when I was in undergrad, I learned how can you study psychology without studying the environment. There's no way you could look at the individual and just study the individual. You have to also take a look at the environment. So to even just study just the individual, to me, that's just something that, it doesn't make any sense. So again, our mind tends to really put things together categorically and superficially, opposed to extended thinking and looking at it from more in-depth level. And when people say, again, though, about this whole human nature thing, and I like to use the example of greed, because I get that a lot. I get the greed thing a lot. It's just human nature, and, people just like that. No, again, as I stated earlier, yes, humans, yes, we do have, we all self-preserve. But again, human nature can only correlate to the human needs. If we have more than enough, there's no point to hoard resources when there's so much to go around. That is a learned behavior that we learned, okay, about having that type of control. And this is what I say about us humans. This is where it kind of questions our intelligence about us, that we still have this mindset, But I really think what's really wrong with this world is that, again, this about people having power over other people and, just having control. I think that's going to lead to the extinction of humans if it continues. Think about how we're damaging our ecosystem for the sake of profit. Something that's not even, real. It's an idea that we invented within ourselves. Not knowing we're doing so much damage to the world that we inhabit. So, this whole myth about humans, that we just naturally competitive and, by nature that, we're selfish. We're looking at it objectively. It is incorrect. You know what I'm saying? Like, the only way, again, you could talk about human nature is by recognizing that, it's based on our human needs. And if it's not met, people are going to act differently. They're going to behave differently. When people's needs are not met, people behave differently. And that's just evident, So I'm going to end it with a final thought, what I'm saying? Nature versus nurture. What we need to do to really, see really true change is that we need to create a social precondition that best suits humans to meet their needs. We need to remove this, ridiculous artificial stresses that is very detrimental to the human life. That the fact that the notion that you have to earn your right to live, that you got to do it by selling yourself in order to, to get the basic necessities of life. And there's so much abundance, because again, though, the more, when our needs are met, the safer we feel amongst each other. And the more, happier we are as beings living on this planet we call Earth, And, going back into this, you think about the way the world is right now, poverty, which is the leading cause of death. It is just so mind-boggling that, we got over 1 billion people starving. We got individuals that have more wealth than nations combined. We got people who have a backyard the size of Africa. Like, to me, that's just like, it just mind boggles the hell out of me still that we still live in this type of world. So when I speak about poverty, I also want to mention, I'm not only talking about extreme poverty, people not having their needs met, and also relative poverty, which is basically people are just barely making it, day by day. But it's also a third type of poverty that was coined by Martin Luther King Jr., and it's the poverty of the spirit. Okay? And what I mean about the poverty of the spirit is the reason why we haven't really touched our inner selves, our inner being. This is why we see the world the way we see it today. We haven't really tapped into our spirituality. This is why we still continue to live the way we live. Like, we kind of disregard of, knowing that there's so many other people out there so deprived. Like, we just kind of like, it's just like, it's so normal to us, that we just kind of like, keep going. And it's really because too, at the same time, we're so caught up within ourselves too of trying to make a living, you know. But this is why we need to really understand that we have the beginning of really understanding everything begins within us. Okay, everything, you know, everything. And again, you know, once we realize, okay, that the world within creates the world without. And until we do that, there's not going to be no change. And this is why, again, it is so important to really understand everything begins within. Like we're so spiritually lost that, you know, this is why we have these wars. People are dying daily. You know, people are just suffering over things that could be easily fixed like this, you know. And you know, and speaking of biology, you know, we are our own chemists, and our chemists is the thoughts that we put in our mind. So we have to understand that, you know, we're the ones that are, you know, in control of ourselves, you know, and this is how we're able to change within ourselves to change the world, you know. But we have to start by, you know, first of all, changing our thoughts so we can change our action, and once we change our action, then we can change the world. So I'm gonna end it real quickly, you know. So it's not nature versus nurture. It is nurture working in harmony with nature for the betterment of our biology and, more importantly, for our soul. I am DJ Jones of all, Lane Neil, Chris Ryder. We all did at the Roundtable Podcast, your source to knowledge. Make sure you click like, share, and most importantly, subscribe to our YouTube channel, Did at the Roundtable Podcast, baby.